Un des plus grands défis aujourd'hui, à mon avis, c'est l'éducation et la sensibilisation de l'ensemble de la population aux thématiques qui sont le changement climatique, les inégalités sociales et surtout leur montrer qu'on a les solutions aujourd'hui pour répondre à ces enjeux.
Comment mobiliser les entreprises ou institutions, collectivités, peu importe l'organisation, on peut faire de la RSE partout, eh bien on va avoir un certain nombre d'outils de communication et de valorisation. On fait, on partage et on fait savoir.
Peu importe le domaine dans lequel on veut œuvrer, il faut faire vivre les gens, le projet en soi, comme ça ils vont devenir des agents de notre projet, puis ils vont rayonner, ils vont faire rayonner. Tous les petits détails subtils de l'entreprise vont rayonner un peu partout.
The only sustainable way is to have a collaborative thinking.
We have to enter in a lifelong learning mode where everyone can learn at any pace, at any time.
In my view, sustainability means a given community meets its own needs, present and future, with its own resources, without in any way impairing the ability of other communities to meet their needs, present and future.
Our children and young ones, we have to prepare them to meet their future in the flexible way, in the innovative way.
We have to do this and we need to do it now.
Salut les poussettes. Poussettes. Michel Serres, 2012. Il est avec nous dans un quart d'heure.
Good evening to the Poussette. Thumbies, you know, yes, some people know about those addicts, you know, young people using them thumbs all the time, video games addicts and text message addicts. These are our two friends from Le Furet, this famous bookshop in Lille, and they are in the lobby of a theater, and they'll be selling some books because right after the closing ceremony, our guest of honor will be signing his books. They're signing, they're very welcoming, we'll be coming in a minute, wait for us, we'll be buying those books. So here we go again for the closing ceremony or session of this World Forum 2017. I just would like to exchange with you what you were telling me. A photographer was telling me yesterday. So it's interesting to listen to them. And he was saying, I can observe through my camera that this year something has changed at the World Forum. I feel that people feel more committed, engaged. They seem to have taken ownership of all those different items and topics. It started really hard when we did the opening session. We were very straightforward. We are becoming more and more mature. And this year, 2017, was really a moment of acceleration. We moved to the fast-track process. Of course, the objective of the forum has to do with sharing good practices, to disseminate them, multiply them around the world. It is also a place where we start creating initiatives to transpose them to different territories here in France, but also all around the world. This is a foundation moment, a real opportunity to share your opinions, your views, your initiatives. On Tuesday morning, the production that we have issued together, if you're not here, we'll explain to you, we have a 90-page document on the basis of which the chairman of the World Forum and his teams have worked for one day and a night, because this is very precious to us, and you have produced this. This is the fruit of your work. And all this to make sure that we have a step ahead in terms of proposals to be made to the world, to companies, to our surroundings, to the circles that we know. And more than ever, Philippe Vasseur, president of the World Forum, will have an opportunity to say something and send across a message before we invite our guest of honor, because he is going to provide you with the headlines of a New Yorker next week. And over now to Philippe Vasseur, president of the World Forum, who is going to introduce the headlines of a New Yorker next week, the cover page. As you can see, this is the cover page of a New Yorker, which is an American, of course, newspaper or magazine which issues hundreds of thousands of copies, and this is the cover page of the 23rd of October 2017. We're only on the 19th. All the topics that you have been developing, which paved the way to this forum. Those who were with us at the opening ceremony know about this. Everything is summarized in this drawing, which is by itself very provocative by essence, because of course we'll have robots one day, we'll have artificial intelligence one day, but having a look at this pet, this little dog, which is a robot, I don't know. I'm quite skeptical about this. But anyway, with this allegory, which is represented through this drawing, through this cover page, at the end of the day, the robot seems to be quite compassionate, seems to be sympathizing, seems to be really looking after the human being. The human being is considered as a beggar. You can see that human being begging right at the feet of robots, and the dog seems to pity human beings. And if one day robots were, of course, to allow us to get rid of our chores, of our repetitive tasks, which are sometimes quite tedious and boring, we would have plenty of time to do something else. We, of course, because the robots would be working for us, we could delegate to robots. But of course, we haven't settled this issue during the forum. But I had to show you this. I could not resist, because this is all about what's happening. And I was wondering whether, some spies from the New Yorker were not at the World Forum this week. But anyway, we're coming to the end of our forum. And yes, it's working. We are now coming to the last stage. We're coming to the conclusion. I'm not going to draw any true conclusion, because I think the best conclusion ever will be the one provided by Michel Serres. It has been a long time that we were thinking of inviting such a guest of honor. We wanted someone who would come from the upper levels, somebody at the top level. It's not easy to find such a philosopher. We don't have so many philosophers today in the world who can understand the complexity of our world, the world of human beings, especially the one which has been initiated by progress or technologies or scientific innovation. Of course, without being pejorative, we wanted a top philosopher, somebody who stands out, have names, I won't mention them. We didn't want a poor quality philosopher. We wanted a big name, somebody extraordinary. We wanted Michel Serres because it has to do with observation. He has a very thorough knowledge of philosophy, and he has been reflecting about society and the reflections around the world. It's a real honor to invite him today. I won't be doing the conclusion of the World Forum. He will do it on my behalf. And I would like to deliver a few thoughts to start with. We are closing a World Forum, but as soon as we close a forum, we're thinking about the next one. If we're holding a forum just for the sake of discussing between one another without really having an impact on our work, without thinking about new perspectives, this forum would prove to be useless. So for the coming year, for the year 2018, we are setting ourselves a roadmap, and we are setting commitments, making commitments for the future, and 3 main commitments. Some of those commitments might correspond, let's say, to a sort of struggle of influence to try and convince stakeholders to come and join us, and all the others. And there are many things we can do ourselves. We can convince people at our scale. The first type of commitment I would like to mention has to do with contributing, even if it's at a very modest level, to try and provide answers to questions which are being asked on the responsible revolution, which is already on the way, and we've been able to witness this in the course of a forum. And this came to my mind this morning. We need to clarify. We need to clarify the definition. Once for all, we need to know what we mean by CSR. What is this all about? We see that whether we are on one continent or the other, we do not necessarily have the same definition. We need to clarify this. It is very important for us, besides all the conflicts that we may have, we need to come to a single definition of CSR. The second contribution, which might be ours, by the way, has to do with artificial intelligence. Can we regulate artificial intelligence? Sincerely speaking, I have doubts about this. But, however, and we've said this together, when we say that Google has now an ethical committee about artificial intelligence, we think that if Google does it, there is a real role of lobbying to be developed so that in companies, internally, companies which are directly involved in artificial intelligence, we need to set rules in terms of ethics. We have the academic world to help us, universities, and we should probably have some rules to use artificial intelligence. We need a committee. So let's rewrite Asimov. You know who Asimov is. If you don't know Asimov is one of course, the greatest science fiction writer of this century. And he has based his work on the role of robots compared to human beings. He has said the 3 rules for robots or robotics that should define actions that robots can't do, in order not to have a negative impact on human beings. The third rule is that if you cannot do otherwise, because you are jeopardizing the life of a human being, you need to definitely annihilate yourself and kill yourself. So maybe we should start working on this particular topic. It will be the contribution of the World Forum of Lille to this reflection, which is very interesting. Second type of commitment or engagement, it has to do with suggesting in a much more concrete way some general measures allowing or fostering the development of CSR, measures which do not depend on us, but for which we may have a role of proposal and maybe a sort of incentive as well. We've touched upon this in the course of that forum. We should not hesitate to be bold and daring. I know that sometimes some people may not like it as soon as we talk about taxation. We're not allowed to talk about taxation if you're not a tax officer, and above all, you should not think that taxation should serve a particular cause. We think that instead of having a taxation, which is sometimes considered as being a punishment or highly penalizing, this is a good idea. We should, of course, sentence the bad guys instead of the good guys. I think it's easier for us to convince entrepreneurs to launch CSR. Should there be a bonus at the end? It would be an incentive. It might be for responsible products which are stamped as being responsible. We could have reduced VAT. Why not? Or we could try and make sure that we deliver this to specific companies. A reduced rate of taxation for CSR-based companies. France is very good when it comes to taxations. We're very productive in this, and we're very innovative as well. A second potential, which already does exist in some companies, has to do, by the way, Mr. President of the MEDEF in France, this board of major CEOs in France, we think that the fact of having an obligation to include CSR elements in the variable remuneration of CEOs would be very good. It is something that we should be praising. And Mr. Chairman, by the way, each year, as soon as we would know about the variable remuneration of a particular CAC 40 company in France, this would generate tons of comments, papers, which usually were not always at the benefit of a company. I think if we were to explain that the remuneration of CEOs is a remuneration which corresponds to criteria which are part of CSR, I think it would be something that could reconcile the world of business with today's world and today's society. At last commitment to be made, the third one. We can do it. It's easy. It's within hand reach. We've already demonstrated this in this region when we launched Revolution number 3, Red 3, when we launched the social business, it was something concrete. We can generate projects on a territory. I do believe in the notion of territory, and we will come to this. Michael Schumann, who has expressed himself, comes to the U.S. He represents himself a movement of 35,000 companies. He is a specialist of what we call local economics. He has done a presentation which was found as very enthusiastic. We're not going to talk about his book since we need to advertise Michel Serres' book right now. But anyway, vertically, when it comes to the different sectors, we can foster and encourage interactions between the different stakeholders. It was mentioned in this forum as well, and we are working on this round the year, thanks to the Alliance Network. We're talking about charters for responsible procurements or purchases. Responsible procurements are one way to make sure that we can make progress in the right direction to cover the end of a chain. We could also have charters which are charters based on industrial sectors or particular segments. My proposal is to say, let's find, not only here in France or in northern France, but also in the other territories, 10 companies, pilot companies, which agree to carry out this exercise and experience. I'm sure we can find them. That would be a great demonstration. If we manage to emphasize and highlight those 10 companies, and if we can show what was that virtuous chain which was created with responsible procurements or practices which are responsible in the different industrial sectors, we have evidence that this can happen. Demonstrations is worth 1,000 words. You know, people, of course, listen to speeches, but they need demonstrations. They need to be given evidence that it works. And I'm convinced that this is the only way we'll make things progress. And then in the dimension of territories, you were raising, of course, the example of Michael Schumann. I think we can, and I'm fully convinced that we have the capacity to do so, and this is within reach. We need to develop responsible ecosystems at the scale of a territory where there are synergies, where people know each other, see each other regularly, work together. We can associate all the different stakeholders. This is what we've done with Revolution 3. We associated the academic world, the political world, the economic world, all the people who wanted to go for it. We have this association of different stakeholders. We can develop territorial markets. Some people have already done this. We can have dedicated savings products, investment products for the benefit of territories. This is what we've done when we launched the saving schemes for citizens, so that savings collected on a particular fund can end up investing third revolution projects. We will touch upon this soon. We'll say that this is concrete and this corresponds to figures and numbers, and it is quantified and has paved the way to project. And then it is the framework of a territory that we can, according to me, more easily implement some actions of circular economy, collaborative economy. I think that the territory, thanks to new technologies in a world which is very global, can be fully relevant. It doesn't mean that we are just going to be less open-minded. No, we're not going to withdraw in our shells. We'll keep on exchanging. And finally, and I will close with this, still about the territory, I think that we can do an enormous work
right now by integrating responsibility clauses in terms of society environment in the public markets, in the public bidding. I think this is a one-shot, it can be done immediately. We worked on a charter to integrate the social responsibility of companies. You only have to sign it, and from tomorrow onwards, I just wanted to show it to you before. From tomorrow onwards, we'll ask some companies, and we suggest to companies and other institutions in the region to sign it. It is a commitment to be responsible, to be accountable, and if it is of interest for you, and I'm sure it is, go online on our website. It is freshly there. You'll find all the elements about this CSR integration charter. We don't want anybody to be able to tell us that we are not giving the means to integrate those practices. We might even have other stakeholders signing this charter else than institutions like agencies, public agencies, or whatever. This is the conclusion we are drawing. This is the commitment from outside after this forum. This is the roadmap for the year 2018, and we will report on it. This is requesting and it is demanding, and we need to go out, and we need to stop trying to control everything and to stay in nice surroundings. We need to be on the shop floor. We need to be in the field. We need to be able to be free and to act as we wish, not to do whatever a mess, but we need to be able to experiment, to test. And every time I hear a president of a state or a minister, they are speaking about this. And I think time has come now to stop. Let's stop to be top down. There are so many initiatives. Let's let these initiatives be prosper and enriching. And I hope it is. I'm sure it's going to be better after, and not it was not better before. Thank you very much for this transition. Thank you, Mr. President. As you see, we arrived on Tuesday with this note, frame note, which you were able to download from our website of the Responsible Revolution 2017. And it was inviting us to work on 5 challenges. And we are going out, we're leaving with those 7 proposals on this roadmap. You will in order to present our guest of honor, who is going to talk about this roadmap and commitments. We need somebody who's guarding. We need somebody who's looking beyond the crowd and the work we're doing. Michel Serres is this kind of observer. He is above, he stands out, and he looks at this crazy world that is astonishing and wonderful. Same. We try to understand, to see how it can be better tomorrow, and I'm convinced, we are convinced, and we showed it to you this year, that tomorrow will be better, and we have everything we need, and this is what Philippe Vasseur just told us. And this guy standing out, and this is something we can read in his books. He speaks about the focal. It's the human focalization, and he speaks about the thummies, and we did a joke on it at the beginning. We're happy to be able to conclude this work. It's not even a conclusion. It is a sending out, and we're happy to welcome here Michel Serres, member of the French Académie. Welcome.
Bienvenue.
Thank you for this introduction. I would like to react to what was said. First reaction, when I heard Mr. Vasseur, I would like to comment. It's the front page of the New Yorker. Please, looking at this front page, I thought today there's nothing. It's probably really old-fashioned. I've never seen something so old-fashioned. We spoke about transhumanism, but before, we need to be humanist. And I have to tell you that there 3,000 or 4,000 years before Jesus Christ, there was the Etna volcano in Sicily. And do you know that in the magmatic chamber of the volcano, there was a god called Volcano, who was the god of the metal workers. And when you read the old texts, he was forging mobile statues who were serving him. So the question of the robots existed already at the time. And at that time, nobody was really afraid of it. Else then he was a god. So there was some fear, some religious anxiety around the robots. And we are still cultivating this terror. Robots existed at the time. Frankenstein, can you remember Frankenstein? Who was produced in different movies, produced terrible anxiety because he was like a robot. I'm pretty old and I can remember the same idea than robots, but it was a more positive idea. In the years 2000, it would support the housewife to clean the dishes and empty the waste. But this is over now. In order to understand the robot, I would like to tell you a story. It is a wrong story, but it is symbolic. Once upon a time, a young lady coming from a very well-known business school, excellent student, everybody wanted to hire her, and she achieved almost to catch the moon because she, from leaving the business school, she was named Secretary General from a CAC 40 French company. She begins to work one day. She's welcomed. She's brought in her office. It is magnificent, just near the CEO. She's very impressed because of this introduction. She comes in, she steps in, she stays 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, and then she realizes all of a sudden that she has nothing to do. She is anxious because they think she's going to lose her job, and she decides something extraordinary. She phones everybody, she runs all over as if she was very busy, and to pretend somebody is working a lot. And in French, there is a word, in where we say a nothing doer, and then the guy who does, he pretends to do, he is pretending. So it's almost the same word in French, really. I know that. I come from the south of France, and we are making joke about our neighbors of the neighboring region. The CEO calls her in his office and says, "Please, I'm so happy about what you're doing. I'm so happy about all the works you're doing for me. I decided to give you an assistant." Right, she's even more terrified. She comes back into her office. She sees the assistant coming in, and the assistant is a robot. And here we are. She stands with the robot, and she needs to program the robot. Robot is a support. It's a physical, material support. You need to program the robot. So she needs to program the robot not to do anything. Right, he also needs to pretend he's working in spite he's not working. This is the basic problem of the robot. Here we are. That means that the robot is a support, an assistance with a program. It's a material, physical support with a software on top. Hence, you need to program the robot to do something, to do even better, to even better than that. And then all of a sudden, you have a super programmed robot. And then they'll do a lot of things, most of the time better than we do. But who are we in comparison to the robot? Among yourselves, there might be some who saw the birth of children. It is an event, a miraculous event almost. And you see this very little tiny child. It cannot do anything. It doesn't know anything. When you see a veal or a bee, a baby bee, or any other animal, even the apes, from the beginning, from the birth onwards, they're able to do things. The human being is deprogrammed in comparison to the robot. So we scare you, you've been scared with super programmed robots. We have some of them since hundreds and millions of years. The birds fly better than we do. Fishes can even survive underwater. We cannot. Why can we survive? Because we have only capacities, and we are not programmed, deprogrammed. The problem of the human being is a deprogrammation. The problem is not a problem. What I mean to see is that the robots on the New Yorker cover page, we know them since Frankenstein and since even before. It is artificial intelligence. Interesting. Yeah, okay, this exists, right? But from how old is it? I would say 2,000-3,000 years before Christ. 5,000 years ago, the human beings had relationships only orally. They would communicate from mouths and would receive it through the ears. And this was the way of communicating and to create a community and to be even a bigger group. However, all of a sudden, revolution, we invite writing. What is the writing? Writing is a support plus a message. It's a material support, it's paper, let's say, and a message on top. We have a page full of writing. It is 3,000 years old, before Christ, and you have the definition of a element that is support plus message. But this is what I'm saying since the very beginning. And this support plus message, why should we use it? For a very easy and simple reason. You often took notes during a session. And why are you writing? To remember. Hence, writing is an artificial memory. And here already it is artificial. Since this time already, we do not stop to manufacture and make artificial intelligence. It's 4,000 years. Now, don't be afraid, we're doing it. It's 4,000 years, and robots exist since thousands of years. Let's have a look at the cover page again of the new, or it's very old-fashioned, really. It is old, and the cover page is just an illustration. This machine helps me to work. This other machine helps me to write. your computer. The other one helps me to remember. The other machine helps me to solve problems. But they don't have the form of human being. Let's assume that Google or Apple invents a robot with a head and no sex, no. In the United States, we don't have this, and legs and arms. You would be very afraid, but the robot would just do the same as your computer. So tomorrow we'll probably have machines and tools that will be doing the same work than us and even better. But if you give it a human form, you might be afraid. Hence, it is a bluff. It is just a big poker face bluff. The problem of transhumanism it should really rather cause a big laugh. This is what I would like to. This is my reaction to the cover page of the New Yorker. I would say it is probably dated around 1900, at the time of Frankenstein. People using it are the most rich people in the world. I know them. I worked 47 years in the Silicon Valley, and they use their richness, their wealth, to develop their ideology. But it is really only fake. There's nothing behind it. It is a very old-fashioned ideology, as old as the world. So what you think is new, in reality, is not as new. This is my first reaction I would like to share with you regarding looking at this cover page.
Alors, je vais me lever. Vous avez aussi été à l'écoute.
Now, let me take the floor. You have been, of course, following our work. The World Forum is in its 11th edition. CSR at the beginning was a concept, only a concept. It has now become a reality. And Philippe Vasseur was telling us it's important now to put things back in perspective and to redefine and clarify the definition of CSR. We enjoy listening to you. You're talking about the social commitment of the social corpus, so to say. How do you envisage things? How could things happen in companies when it comes to CSR? I'm not really above the rest, so to say, because I used to play rugby as a youngster, and I was right with the players, so I'm not really above the others. I'm having fun with what you're saying anyway. I'm not a superior man or human being, but let's say that what we want to obtain in today's world, this is very interesting. What do you want to reach? What are our goals? We need to be as lucid and concrete and as clear as possible. We need to try and understand as much as we can the elements around us. This is what counts. And I would like to convert you to this. I think that we are currently experiencing the most exceptional period of history. There's no equivalent all throughout history. It is extraordinary, and since this period is exceptional, it requires extraordinary judgments and assumptions and forecasts. What is exceptional about this era, this period of time? I've mentioned this in my book, and I have already revealed this in my previous book. There are elements that we can list, so to say, and let me draw a list of those different items very briefly. The first element on the list has to do with the fact that we have been in peace for now 65 years, and no one is really aware of it. However, such a peace period of 65 years is particularly unique in history. Some historians have worked on this, and they think that between the 3000 and now, humanity was in peace 6% of the time, not more. War was a perpetual event. So we have been experiencing peace for 65 years, which means that our time has never had any other equivalent. Nothing has matched that before or after the Trojan War. So we haven't done anything. So first thing. Second, new element on the list. In the years right after the Second World War, some biologists or doctors have invented many types of medicine, sulfamides and penicillin and so forth, that did eradicate infectious diseases. A doctor in the years 30 or 45, I'm sure that doctors know, not from the 1936, but a doctor in his practice would receive 4 people suffering from syphilis and 4 patients suffering from lung diseases, tuberculosis mainly, and 2 others. In 1955, no, things do change. And now, from then on, something happens with the development of medicine, something new in history happens. The age hope does increase. And of course, our life cycle does expand. And ever since that particular time, we have a new life. We now control better birth. We, of course, postpone death. So in a way, we can say that our lifespan has been extended. And let's say that now our life expectancy is much, much greater. So now, what about the consequences of this rise or incremental increase of life expectancy is huge. When my ancestors were getting married, they would swear, they would say that they would be faithful for, let's say, 10 or 20 years, but now things have changed. We trust now each other, and we have vows, which mean that we will remain faithful for 50 years. Socially, it makes a difference, doesn't it? Now, I'm talking about finance. I don't like to talk about finance usually, but it's always relevant to do so. Since growth is reaching to since our life expectancy reaches now 90 or plus, there's a question of inheritance. If you die at around 80, 85, 96, inheritors will have retired. Yes. So the, let's say, the huge financial heritage all of a sudden is going to remain a circular way in the non-productive generation. And this is something new, economically speaking, because when you read novels from the 19th century, there's always a hero, a young man who, at the age of 30, is already consuming and eradicating the inheritance from his parents. So I think we need to provide a lot of advice to the young generations. I do not fully agree with this. Do they need to be advised on the way forward? I have been taught a lot by youngsters, by the young people, and I think the advice process should work both ways. The elderly people need to listen to the young people. What is science, by the way? Science is what adults teach to kids. What is technology all about? What kids teach to adults. Yes, this is what it's all about. Yourselves, I'm sure that when something doesn't work in your computer, you just call your son or grandson, and he does fix it. He does it really fast. So therefore, we need to rebalance the educational function in our society. Let's stop on this for a minute. So a vertical increase of life expectancy, technology, yes, and now let's give a few figures about agriculture, farming. Until the 1950s, let's say that we were, in our countries such as France, Belgium, Germany, and so forth, we were between 60 to 70% of farmers. Today, 3.6% only of farmers. So there is a real change that has never happened all throughout humanity. The nourishing fathers of humanity have seen their numbers decline tremendously, and this has never happened since the Neolithic age, where our ancestors did improve and started to breed cattle and plants and grow plants in their farms. So if you add life, death, a new kind of man. As soon as life expectancy does increase, all throughout my life, let's say that I've seen world demography being multiplied by 2. It means less than 2 billion to start with. 2 times 2. This has never happened. This has never happened. We've never experienced such a time when demography was multiplied by twice as much. So all those parameters are exceptional. They never happen all throughout human history. So this is something new, and it has never been experienced. And this new element, we're not fully aware of it. We're not fully aware of that change. And this is what my book does. My book says it was better before, but I will tell you why. And this is what my book does. My book is saying, in view of this, in view of those conditions, in view of those circumstances, it is clear that we are experiencing today legal frameworks and legal environments, economic environments, and so forth, which date back to a time when the world was not similar to our world. So today, we have a necessity to invent once again new types of human relations, institutions, frameworks, and so forth that we are not even aware of. So the necessity to innovate today comes from this element or articulation or switch or crossroad. We are experiencing a fantastic new era, but which is also very old as the outdated cover page of a New Yorker, as tacky as this particular page, front page of a New Yorker. Of course, in my book, it was better before. I'm trying to assess, and I try to take stock of the situation. I assess this new element and compare it to what I experienced as a young man. And if I do so, I can assure you that it's much, much better today. So this book, in relation to this book, I have 2 more questions to ask you, and then we'll give the floor. No, I haven't heard you. Could you start again? The round of applause. I've covered your voice. I haven't heard you. I just wanted you. Please, round of applause again, please, for Mr. Serres. Anyway, 2 more questions, and then we'll give the floor to the audience for a Q&A session. It was better before. In your book, you talk about this Thumby, which was born in 2010, all those thumb addict people using the thumbs for text messages, video games. There's a U.S. company that I know particularly well, which is called Petit Mou. And this U.S. company has been making opinion polls that do show that after 30 or 35, you work with your index fingers, then you work with thumbs. So it's a question of age, or you can do it with 3 fingers. You don't know this company? That's Microsoft. Microsoft. Little softy. This is why when I arrived, I didn't get it. The world. The world. Why aren't you saying monde in French instead of world? Because elsewhere you talk about world. You are companies. If you always talk in English, if you speak in English, you are paving the way to the Anglo-Saxon world, and you're depriving yourselves of your own market. So be aware of this. Be aware of the English supremacy. You need to speak your language, but here in this room, you have people coming from the whole of the world who speak English every day. Of course, we need a communication language. There's always been such a language in the Mediterranean. They used to speak Greek in the 5th century before Jesus Christ, but it was Latin. Today it's English. Tomorrow it might be Urdu or, another Chinese-derived language. But English being a dominant language is something else, don't you think? The countries, of course, that use English for every types of uses are committing suicide in a way from a cultural point of view. If you have a responsible revolution to be carried out, just speak French, which is a great revolution, by the way. Just stick to French. You need to be given this particular brochure or leaflet. It's all in French, 100% French, by the way. Ah, responsible with A and not with I. I understand. We have both versions. We also have an English version of this booklet. In this book, your book, Fambi, and in order to contradict all the people who said it was much better before, you've mentioned farming, agriculture, and so forth. But Poussette, this new guy or this new boy or girl or man or woman, see, of course, that there are hundreds of people, millions of people who haven't got access to water. In this book, you find about people who always grumble and criticize the present and say it was much better in the past. What do you say to the young people when it comes to those people being deprived of water? It's a very old story. Back in the 17th century, the one who, of course, invented calculation method said that the world was the best. And Voltaire, who didn't know anything about philosophy, was telling him, well, it's not possible for you to say that the world is the best ever because the earth is quaking in Lisbon, Portugal. I haven't said, dear friend, that the world was good. No, I've never said that the world was globally good, because I'm not fully stupid, as you may understand. I know there is hunger. I know that there are many terrorist attacks. I know that people are starving to death. So I know our world isn't good. I know that our world is not entirely good, but it is much, much better than the previous one. And much better. My assessment is a time-based assessment, which goes from the present towards the past, and which tries to assess what is new in our time. And in my title, I said, it's better now. I haven't said good. I said, it's better now. I haven't said it is the best now. And all of a sudden, we see that better is a bit better than good, so to say. Of course, there are problems, and we have to settle this every day. And this is the objective of any project. I'm fully aware of this. It's not perfect, but I'm just saying it's better, not good, but better. And this is where Voltaire was wrong. So, of course, it's an old story, and very often when I have such discussions, I have to say that, yes, there are still terrorist attacks, rapes, you name it. I think that there's one or two women who die every week in France due to, of course, marital violence. So this is, the world isn't good, yes. The world isn't good. My assessment in my book has to do with settle the question, what is progress all about? Try and settle this, try and give an answer to this. Are we really fully aware of the type of progress that we have made ever since the Second World War took place? This is the question. And since you are economists, you have businesses, you can't do without understanding the world in which we live, and you can't do without understanding the requirements, institutional requirements, which are required by today's world.
It is pretty crazy, because what you said was my other question, actually. From what I understood, reading your books is as a permanent invitation to comprehend, understand the complexity, to have this culture of learning before acting. And when you are an entrepreneur or a father, a mother, or an old moaning guy, or somebody with the zombies, how Could you explain to us? We need to advance on that. We need to improve on that. How can we moderate a culture of understanding in order to be able to act? The world is complex. We're speaking about CSR, new economic model, circular economy. We're shifting everything. But if we want everybody to follow and be able to follow on this road, we need to give them the culture of understanding before acting. How can we do that? By publishing a book that is called It Was Better Before.
5 euros.
5 euros.
Non, mais 5 euros, les amis.
5 euros, guys, 5 euros. On the cover page, there is a drawing I like a lot, and it shows a woman washing the clothes by hand. She's hitting on I get letters from old women saying, if you knew at the time, it was the best day in my life. And it's right, it's real, because you are in a company. I worked in a company. My father was extractor of stones in a river, and we were working by hand, pulling sand and stones and shoveling on the trucks. It was pretty heavy. We had to fill the truck. And 30 years later, it's a machine. At the time, we would put it on a conveyor belt, and then afterwards, now you have all the shuffle equipment, and the old equipment was in the garage, and we would stock it outside, and the difficulty and the heaviness of work and the accidents by work. I remember the time when we obliged the guys to put helms. They wouldn't want to, and we had less and less work accidents. When you look at hygiene, nutrition tools, equipment. Some of you may be from the farmer's background. You remember maybe how to cook a pig, or how to store the ham in the cellar, and my father would then take the vermin out. That was just biodiversity. But we were sick more often. We had 2-3 times a month we were sick. Our stomach was sick. This doesn't exist. This doesn't occur anymore. So this book is very fun because it shows a lot of details, and it shows how much it changed. And it was better before. Keep saying the morning grandpa to Thumbi, and before I existed at the time, and I remember this time. Our governors or elected politicians were all good guys, nice guys. Yes. The list you show is impressive, absolutely. It was better before. It was better in older times. What is the base? Where do you put your hopes in? You have 2 hours time. No, 2 minutes. It is already pretty good to have a clear eyesight on how the situation is today. If we need to anticipate what is tomorrow, you need to invite somebody with a crystal ball. I don't know. And for a very simple reason, you should think about it. I take just a couple of examples. You remember the fall of the Berlin Wall. 8 days before, would you have found an economist or politician saying, "Be careful, the wall is going to fall"? Nobody expected that. 8 days before, 2 weeks before, and 2 days before, and it just fall. It is just not foreseeable. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, journalists came and said the wall fall for this and that reason, and they're fighting because they have different reasons. But this is after we understand what happened. But before, we cannot foresee things. What I want to say is I told that's what I meant with the robots. In the 50s, 60s, there were manual robots. Nobody would think that robotics would pass through, would need intellectual work. A computer is not a manual work. It is an intellectual robot. It's a formal robot, but nobody would have dared to think so. I have a friend. He is from the Science Academy. He can speak about innovation or prevision. He has a very nice story to tell. He says, in the years 15 to 16, when the First World War, Great War would take a lot of time, the strategic experts saw that the front line was very long, and it was a problem of communication between the different armies. So they begin to work really on the communication issue. And in doing so, they looked at the horses and at the pigeon raisers to have more pigeons, to have more performance. And this is the time where radio came. Hello, hello. Where did that come? It did not come from pigeons and from the horses. The radio came and resolved the problem instantly. And this is something nobody had foreseen. This is the reason why I prefer for tomorrow wait to give an answer and give the floor to Madame Soleil with her crystal ball. Your friend is Thierry? Your friend you're talking about is Thierry? It's another one. It's another guy, because the Thierry is Chateau Thierry, no? Right. So we're going to take 2 or 3 questions from the public. We'll just have then a short goodbye afterwards. We commented a lot the cover page of the New Yorker. Any comments?
Je la trouve complètement déplacée. Elle correspond à l'inverse de ce que nous avons vu en disant qu'on ne verra jamais de robots.
We're never going to see a robot looking like a human being, but it shows what people are worried about. They begin to present things like this. It is striking. It's not the robot with a little dog. It's just fun, really. But also it exists, they say in Japan. However, what struck me is to imagine that the robot might be able to give money to you being begging. You could program it to do that. So who would program that? Everything is a question of program. It's the American ideology to stay more is better. I remember having a dinner in Baltimore in a restaurant. I was brought such a terrible dish I wasn't able to eat it. And then he came to ask me, you want more? And plus more is better. And more you program a robot, more he is specific. His performance is higher. It's like the pigeon and the... It is true to say this is a fundamental, very fundamental question. We are deprogrammed, and it is because we are deprogrammed that we are able to learn, can adapt ourselves in an extreme way to completely unforeseen. We are human beings from the unforeseen, not animals. They have much higher performance than we are, but they are not adapted to unforeseen events. We are more adapted. We are deprogrammed. We are adapted to unforeseen events. Here's a mic. Any questions, remarks?
Oui, monsieur, là.
Right, you.
Bonjour, monsieur. Merci beaucoup
Good
pour votre
evening.
intervention.
Thank you very much
J'avais une
for
petite
your
question
intervention. I
parce que je
have a
trouve qu'il y a un
question
paradoxe.
because there's
Vous
a
dites
paradox
que
on here.
c'était
You
pas mieux
say
avant, et pourtant,
it is
quand
not
nous, on
better
travaille
before. However,
sur ce
when
nouveau
we
thème de la
work on
RSE,
the new
etc.,
subject of the
l'impact positif,
CSR,
on
of the
retourne
positive
toujours à d'anciennes
impact,
méthodes.
we
Je pense
always
par
come back
exemple
to
à
old
l'économie, à
methods,
d'anciennes méthodes. Par exemple, sur l'économie circulaire,
like the circular
sur le
economy,
raccourcissement des filières.
to
En
have
fait,
shorter
on s'inspire
ways.
vraiment un peu comme la Renaissance
We are
du
like in the
passé.
Renaissance
Et donc
looking
vous,
at
vous
the
nous dites c'était
past.
pas mieux avant,
You
c'est-
say it wasn't
mais
better
après, on
before,
essaye
it's
de
better
s'inspirer
before,
du
but
passé. J'espère avoir été clair.
I hope it's clear. We
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez? L'exemple de la bioéconomie, par exemple.
like the bioeconomy. You can find interesting details and examples that contradict my thesis, but it's only examples. My point was my global my reflection. Question is not to know whether life is good and the world is all right. So the short ways economies existed a century
La
ago.
boucle, il a détruit.
Maybe I did not answer your question. I kind of feel I didn't quite understand what you... I'm a little bit deaf, I'm sorry. The new economic order we're trying to put in place in companies, we're inspiring ourselves on what happened before, like the short ways in agriculture, the circular economy, we're recycling the waste. Everything existed centuries ago, and struck me the first way. From the circular economy, Raphael told us we had to take example from nature. So we are trying to inspire ourselves from the past, and you keep saying that might be a contradiction. This is a real question. It's a question in depth, and I did not answer this question, but now I will do. Most of the time, when you want to innovate, you continue the curve as it was before, and you say it's going to have a result, a causal effect from a consequence from the beginning, from the origin. I've been a teacher all my life, and I taught the history of sciences. And I learned something very interesting. What is an invention? What is innovation? This guy invented this, and how did he do to invent this? And I can tell you that in 8% of the cases, innovation has nothing to do with what was before. Not only the thing was completely new, however, and on top, the science world would not accept the innovation because they would say he was completely crazy, telling us stories, bullocks. And Boltzmann, for instance, who had an invention, he had committed suicide in Trieste, and Dr. Semmelweis. He was an obstetric, worked in obstetrics. He had 2 clinics for women, maternities. The one was sisters, and the other one was students. The one where the students were working had 4 times more death cases than in the one led by the sisters. He thought it's not probably because of the prayers. That was his hypothesis to start with. And then he realized that the students would not wash their hands before dissecting the cadavers and the births. But for us, it is clear. At that time, it was incredibly wrong. He died, he was excluded, he was condemned by the Association of Doctors. So you have specific cases, and there are several of those in the history where the fact of going through the end of your extrapolating, you reach the right solution. But the right innovation has nothing to do with, this is what I said with regard to communication via radio versus the pigeon and the horses in the Great War. It is not related. It is interesting to think about it. Above all, now where everybody is innovating, and there is a lot of innovation, but nobody knows exactly what it is.
Oui, Raphaël.
Raphaël? Yes. One question. Thank you very much for this stunning presentation. We feel like buying your book now. We could be listening to you for hours. And there's one comment you've made that I really like is what science is what parents teach to kids, and technology is what kids teach to their parents. You're raising something that we're losing today. It has to do with transfer of knowledge between generations. That it says young people can, of course, teach to the elderly and vice versa. It works both ways. Sometimes you go back to old systems which were in operation in the past, and we need the transfer of knowledge. It is now being lost. How can we re-stimulate it? How can we foster those intergenerational exchanges? Don't get me wrong, but I would like to tell you that even if I worked 47 years in the Silicon Valley, and since I know about those issues, I'm now 87, and regularly I call my grandchildren when they have problems. Why? With the IT system, I use the new technologies as a tool, as an instrument only. My grandchildren are in a world generated by new technologies. That's the difference. On one side, there is myself using the technology. On the other side, my grandchildren have a culture. And those thumbies, those people using their thumbs all the time, it's not my culture, it's my grandchildren's culture. I still have some problems sometimes, some bits and pieces, whereas, the kids don't see that difference. They evolve in that world. They were born with it. Well, all this, the transfer of knowledge depends on people, the will to transfer knowledge. It depends also of how humble adults are. I would like to invite the adults to be very humble when they discover what this world is generating. We need to be humble. When people say you need to teach the young people this and that, well, let's be very humble. Enough, That's enough. It's so outdated. Following the Second World War, the radar appeared and so forth. I was a sailor myself. I was 20, 25. We were very aware of this. And as I was in the Navy, there was an admiral, and the admiral who was giving orders didn't get it. He couldn't understand radar technology. I was in the Navy, and I would tell to the admiral, go left, such and such degree, and so forth. He didn't get it. There was a gap, a huge gap in terms of knowledge, which in the past was normal, okay? The young people knew better. Let me tell you another story, since we're talking about a last one, before we leave. In a small village in the Quercy area, they had never seen an automobile, a car. And when the first car arrived, farmers would lift the hood and say, "Where's the horse? Where's the horse? Where's the horsepower?" And when I say this to people, when I tell this story, the people in the cities who've never seen horses and who've only seen cars, if a horse suddenly rides, they will lift the tail and say, "Where's the engine?" So that's the gap, if we are talking about gaps. Last question before we close officially. Last, who has the microphone? The last question. Where are you? Can you wave at me? Right there at the top. Please make sure you speak loud because I'm a bit deaf. Thank you very much, Mr. Serres. Is it fine that way? Is it loud enough? I'm forcing it a bit too much, maybe. I was asking you, so inspiring. You are just incredible. Could you help me with a problem that I have, that many other people in my generation may have as well? It has to do with the national education in France. Especially, you've said that the world is changing and the current structures are not adapted to our world. I can't really see what the national education could do. Could you help me so that I can help the national education framework to better teach to my kids? He said, no, I can't. I can't help you. You just have to face the reality as it is. I'm not a minister of a national education. I will never be one, by the way. But there is something that I would like to let you know when it comes to this. I was a teacher for 50, 60 years in the US or in France, and I became aware of those people who were asking those questions and who had solutions were doing reforms. Yes, you need to reform the school system, and many reforms happened, and there was a reform every year or every 2 years. Imagine a plant which makes some socks, and all of a sudden is going to start making tubes, and then it will be, I don't know, bulldozers, you name it, or grabs or whatever. See, it doesn't make sense. The reform of a national education is something which has never been settled. We've never found a solution. It's not only France, it's everywhere around the world. We want to imitate the US. They are such in a state of very poor education, worse than all the other countries around the world. And we want to imitate the US. This is a real disaster. In the USA, they are in such a poor state. And we're far superior to the US when it comes to education, and we still don't make it. But at least we have reforms, you know. It sounds right. And this is one of the 5 challenges of a responsible revolution. Thank you to you, Michel Serres. Stay with us for another 5 seconds before we officially close this forum. Standing ovation for Mr. Serres. This famous French scholar from the French Académie Française. You won't mind if this was a standing ovation? Yes, it was a standing ovation. I think that those round of applause, of course, are worth 1,000 words. I'd like to tell you a story. Yesterday, somebody told me this story. It's a man who's on a horse. The horse is galloping, crossing a village, and all of a sudden somebody shouts, "Where are you going?" And the man on the horse says, "I don't know. Ask the horse." The horse knows where to go, and this is the conclusion that we should mention. If we are not programming ourselves, this is what can happen. The horse will be leading. Let's come back to the cover page of New Yorker. The robot knows, you don't know, so be aware of that. So see you next year. Hope to see you again next year. Thank you very much for attending this forum. Let's meet up in the lobby of his theater with Michel Serres. We'll be signing his books, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to keep on talking to him. Thank you, and have a safe trip back home. Thank you.